Universal Orlando Resort can do pretty much whatever they want when it comes to Halloween Horror Nights, and the crowds speak for themselves. With the resources to create the impossible and license the most in-demand IPs, they create a brand new slate of content each year, and it's always raining money during HHN season, baby. But is this really the best strategy? And could Halloween Horror Nights become an even better event? All the major competition brings back many of their haunts year after year, and sometimes the only new experiences they get are overlays of their old existing haunts. While these returning haunts can be neglected and become stains on the event, they also have two advantages that HHN can't always contend with, and that's hindsight and nostalgia. Being able to go back to the drawing board in between seasons and tweak all those things that didn't work can turn a mediocre haunt into an all-timer, and that's such an amazing sight to see. But being able to experience your favorite haunt year after year with new surprises and quality of life improvements is even better. And on the flip side, it sucks seeing a haunt with so much potential suffer from bad design choices or effects that just didn't perform as intended, or have that potential lost forever due to major last-minute changes from contractual issues. So let's take a look at HHN 2022 through that lens. If any of these haunts were to return for HHN 2023, what improvements would be made based off of the lessons they learned this season? This is their shot at redemption, something that a lot of their peers never got the chance to receive. So let's get to it. Now, all of these changes are going to remain realistic to what other theme park haunts have done between seasons, so unfortunately, Dead Man's Pier won't become Rapture despite the striking lighting similarities. Also, make sure to check out my HHN 2022 review first so you know my feelings on these haunts. I will still go on record and say that Universal Monsters Legends Collide is a perfect haunt as is, but the changing endings were nowhere near as thrilling as they could have been. I would love to hear the struggle as one monster prevails over the other, so what if there were 3 different storylines, with the Mummy, Wolfman, and Dracula all getting to play the hero in their own story? The emotional stakes would make the scares much more intense, and the finale all the more hype. Add some expositional dialogue to the facade, swap the actor placement, especially in that base camp, and provide different audio triggers for each story. With the scenes always changing, there's more room for monster versus monster action, and the excitement of seeing events play out differently than last time. The Weeknd After Hours Nightmare is such a good representation of The Weeknd's individualism and a true statement at HHN. That is until it isn't. Instead of copying that finale directly from Jordan Peele's Us, both of which share very similar themes, copy from something more unique, like The Body Collector's Operating Theater. Rows of mannequins littered with live actors, and keep that video jump scare because it's such a nice twist on the old formula. I just wish my guy had listened to Randy Meeks a little bit more, because you know those sequels always have to be more elaborate. The lead up to that finale is also underwhelming. The subway sets are so flat, especially when Descendants of Destruction is literally right there. They need some more dynamic lighting and layered set dressing to make those scares pop even more. Despite a weak finish, the first 3/4 of this haunt are incredibly strong, and I would love to see The Weeknd's unique vision a few more times at HHN. Descendants of Destruction doesn't do a whole lot with the amount of space that it takes up, and it really needs a better bridge between the intensity of the finale with that slow exposition of the intro. Personally, I love the butcher shop in this haunt, but it doesn't need to be one of the biggest scenes. I'd move it up to directly after the train crash, and by absorbing the transition hallways, there would be enough space left over to create a brand new scene with a decent sized footprint. With Universal raving about the different lighting in this haunt, it's never really clear that this section contains exclusively battery powered lights. A claustrophobic maze-like scene only lit by discarded headlamps or flashlights would be absolutely terrifying. Without the middle section dragging so much, Descendants of Destruction would finally be able to break away from the pack. Bugs Eaten Alive received some incredibly warranted backlash after being so overhyped by Universal, partially because it takes so long to deliver on its ambitious promises. The first 90 seconds are basically just transition hallways, and the overstretched exposition kills all the potential that this haunt had before it can even get started. The first third needs some major retooling, with the projection room getting axed and the blackout and storage hallways being modified. This hallway to the left doesn't actually exist. It's another mirror trick, but I'd make it a reality to add some more space for these intro scenes. And by retooling those, there's more room for at least one major pavilion. I would love to see something outdoorsy juxtaposed with the faux military environment, maybe like a backyard barbecue scene. And you can't tell me that a facade of the model home couldn't be built within the sprung tent. The rest of the haunt flows well, but the finale suffers from the opposite of the intro. It's quick, with no dramatic buildup, and ends abruptly by walking under a mostly static prop. This could be fixed by adding a few more puppets to the honeycomb section, and the addition of frantic military radio calls playing overhead. Seeing only glowing eyes until the huge monster is revealed through dramatic lighting and a bone-shaking roar would really bring that Eaten Alive subtitle to life. I think we all know that the black phone section in the horrors of Blumhouse was a winning formula that I wouldn't want to mess with, except for replacing that cheesy ending with a simple jump scare. Tomato, tomato. Anyways, Freaky had some very bizarre choices and needed to stick with the greatest hits instead of exploring the whole story. As much as I really liked the translation of the mansion scenes, I think they've got to go and be portrayed as the Q video. And the body swap is so good as an intense scare and as a storytelling effect that I'd put it right at the beginning of the haunt. From there, I'd only focus on the existing scenes, just with much bigger footprints. Knock a few walls down to create big show-stopping scenes instead of a narrow and cramped hallway the entire time. And do we really need filler scares like this one? 4 or 5 scenes is still longer than most Blumhouse sections have been, and tonally, Freaky should be the exact opposite of the black phone to make the terror all the more intense in that section. Fiesta de Chupacabras remedies a lot of my complaints about HHN Orlando's formula by utilizing tons of misdirection with animatronics and not relying on actors for literally every single scare. The only scene that didn't work, the mechanic shop, is ripe for an overhaul. The intended effect of the Chupacabras jumping on the barrels above our heads didn't work, and this scene is dark, bland, and boring. What I kept envisioning was like this scene from La Llorona, except it's a Chupacabra at the top of those stairs, devouring a tourist as their blood drips down, and the focus still remains much more on what's above than what's in front. It seems like a perfect segue into the town square, and it's a nice way to subvert the expectations after all the in-your-face scares. Now, I know everyone thinks that I'm full of clam chowder for my thoughts on Dead Man's Pier Winter's Wake, but hear me out. This haunt needs a skybox. Imagine playing a video game with a black sky instead of a beautiful complementary background, or that facade of Fiesta de Chupacabras with black curtains instead of that night sky background. We're constantly asked to be looking up and marveling at the sights above us in Dead Man's Pier, and we should be rewarded with more than an empty background that's constantly illuminated by show light that ruins the illusion. Steal those backgrounds from Legends Collide for all I care, or build up some more flats around the village to create that depth. But there's been too many good workarounds in the past for me to let this slide, and Dead Man's Pier is one of those haunts that's earned that extra TLC. Are we gonna love it or list it after we spice up the Myers house? Because right now it's just so bland. It was a winner with a lot of people, so I'm gonna try and retain the core of what made it so successful. For starters, these sets feel like when you resize an image and the proportions aren't locked, so mainly I'd focus on adding more props just to help the sets from feeling so strange and empty. And I'd reconfigure that hallway with Michael Myers standing at the top of the stairs. It's one of the best scenes of the entire event, and then it's just over. And why he in 2 places at once? Well, it's also been done to death. I would replace that mirror ending with the good old-fashioned game of what laundry is the killer hiding behind. I think seeing someone fly out from behind a bedsheet is much more terrifying than guessing which one of them isn't the mannequin. Spirits of the Coven, please, please just make sense. It's easy to explain the story through the audio of unseen character interactions, and by adding triggers for the actors that propel the storyline instead of flirting that makes 8th grade me sound like Shakespeare. The bones are all there, the narrative just needs to be fixed to tie it all together. Hearing banter between the witches and the patrons in the speakeasy, eavesdropping on a ritual happening as we enter the hotel, listening to men being harvested as we walk through the distillery, and catching the haggish witches murmuring between each other as we enter the tunnels. On the scenic side, take a note from Fiesta de Chupacabras and add some swinging lights or some rolling barrels as misdirection, coupled with some distant laughter in the underground sections. Having a more cohesive narrative would make that finale room add up, and I'd like to see the last 2 rooms combined for a bigger, weirder, splatterfest finale that's a complete tonal shift from the rest of the haunt in the most bonkers way. Hellblock Horror did a lot wrong, but the easiest fix would be to bring in more recognizable monsters and up the costuming budget significantly. Just giving each character a good scare setup with scenery and props would mask a lot of the lackluster sections, while also providing exciting fan service and more participatory scares. I also think some of those empty cell block hallways could be reskinned to feature chain link fences and lots of fog. Arguably not an incredibly detailed setup, but there's an interactive element that matches the intensity these haunts need, and you can't tell me that a chain link gauntlet of the best HHN Orlando monsters wouldn't be the coolest thing ever. Besides, this prison definitely blew up at the end, so reskinning it to have different species than before isn't really that far-fetched. Let me know down in the comments which HHN Orlando creatures you'd love to see return in any capacity, and if you're an old school fan, you're not going to want to miss out on this next drop of videos. Thank you everybody for watching. I do appreciate your support, and if you haven't already liked this video and hit the subscribe button, I'd appreciate it if you did. It gets me one step closer to bringing you even crazier content than this. Now before I go, just remember that the world is a better place because you are in it. If you made it through today, I promise you can make it through tomorrow. And if you think nobody believes in you, well, I promise I believe in you too. This is 6 Billiam signing off, and let's make the world a better place until we meet again. Thank you, everyone.